Well, a story that has been profiled probably on every show here on the radio station, certainly I took it up from a couple of different directions, is the story of University of Toronto professor Jordan Peterson. He was vilified for refusing to use gender-neutral pronouns. Now, there's more to this story. I think a lot of people believed, and we're going to amplify this whole idea of out-of-control political correctness on campuses in just a moment, but let me remind you that Professor Jordan Peterson was vilified by some for saying, well, a man who now identifies as a woman, and Professor Peterson refuses to use female pronouns. And he's saying, no, it's a lot worse than that. And he had identified some 50 or 51 different pronouns people had made up and were insisting they be used, as if any individual, including the professor, could memorize what each individual was demanding they be referred to as. And his alarm that there's a bill coming through in Ottawa that might make it a criminal offense to, in his view, to not use the pronouns people make up for themselves. He said, this is just Orwellian. It's out of control. And now Concordia University marketing professor Agar is fighting against what he calls academic cowardice. And he's God sad, and so he's known as the Godfather. Professor, good morning.
How are you, sir?
Well, did you make that name up for yourself?
No, actually, I was appearing in a rap video about 6-7 years ago, and I put out a call on my social media to come up with a name for my rap alter ego, and that's the name that somebody came up with, and it stuck.
All right. Have I in any way mischaracterized the story of Professor Jordan Peterson?
No, it's accurate. And incidentally, for those of you who want to know more about the story, Professor Peterson and I had a chat on my show, so they should definitely check it out.
How do you do that?
If you just go to YouTube and enter the SAAD Truth, SAAD, it is one of the most recent ones, and we chatted for about an hour and some, so we really got into it.
Now, you have made the charge, I believe, that actually political correctness has done the opposite of what it should do, and it has rejected intellectual diversity. How do you back that up?
Well, if you, for example, I mean, there are many ways that you could back it up, but here's a study that speaks to this issue. If you look at political affiliation in the United States of professors, they're roughly 5-to-1 Democrats. And in some departments where that you have most of the social justice warriors, it can go as high as 44-to-1. So, for example, in sociology, it's 44-to-1. It's the same thing in the humanities and women's studies. So it makes no sense that when you have students being exposed to ideas where there isn't a clear answer, right? I mean, what should be our fiscal policy? Is the death penalty a good idea or not? You don't want everyone in academia to be only supporting one side of the political aisle. So if only from that perspective, we don't have enough diversity.
I'm looking at an article about you and your views, and in it, it reads, University of Toronto physics professor A.W. Pete, who identifies as a non-binary transgender person, says the debate over political correctness is a red herring. Pete says, I don't see any evidence whatsoever that, for example, loud, white, middle-aged, heterosexual, cisgender, able-bodied men are under threat from political correctness on campus. Nobody but goofy professors use that kind of language.
It's unbelievable, right? I mean, first, the idea that you need to associate an identity to someone before you decide on the veracity of their arguments is an affront to human reason and human dignity, right? What I say is true or not true, independently of whether I'm white, cisgender, or not, and all the other nonsense social justice warrior terms.
How do you feel about, because it's Halloween today, the fact that some universities and student unions all across the continent have come up with a list of banned Halloween costumes to protect against cultural appropriation?
I mean, it's breathtaking, right? I mean, I think a year or two ago there was a whole incident at Yale University where a professor wrote a very tepid response to the Yale policy of monitoring Halloween costumes. I mean, she was unbelievably tepid and gentle, and she has since resigned from her position. These are the Christakises. Her husband is a very famous professor of sociology. He's also a physician, and she was, I think, a developmental or educational psychologist. Simply airing out her views forced so much pressure on her that she resigned. Is this what we mean by intellectual freedom? Is this what we mean by academic freedom? It's grotesque.
I thought originally the idea, Professor, on campus of tenure was that you have proven yourself, and now we're going to allow you to put forth ideas, even if they are controversial, and we will protect you in your position to do so.
Well, exactly right. And the reality, though, is that now the backlash from all the social justice warriors, sort of the e-mob that the social justice warriors do and engage in, that tenured people don't feel protected, because even if I'm tenured and I can't be fired, I have to decide whether I have the testicular fortitude to put up against an endless mob attacking me, as Jordan Peterson has experienced. And so the fact that you're tenured, yes, to some extent it protects you, but it doesn't protect you from the just massive e-mob that will come after you if you enunciate a position that is contrary to that which is considered politically correct.
Well, how did this happen? Because it certainly wasn't, in my understanding, how universities used to be. That it used to be one professor would say, well, I think Professor so-and-so is loopy and out of his mind, but hey, he has a right to push his positions.
Well, I think it's a confluence of forces, and that's one of the things that I'll be talking about in my next book that I'm about to write. Look, you've got postmodernism, which basically argues that there are no absolute truths, everything is relative. You have cultural relativists who say, look, there are no human universals, everything is cultural relativist. Radical feminists push positions that are completely contrary to, basic science. And so what you basically have is several so-called intellectual movements that have seeped into academia that are anti-reason, anti-logic, anti-science, and this is why we end up with this utter lunacy on campuses.
And you are taking some of this on YouTube on what you call the SAAD Truth, and it is your last name, which is SAAD.
Exactly right.
All right.
I tackle all sorts of movements that are antithetical to reason and science.
Well, how popular are you with the staff at Concordia University?
Well, I'm lucky to say that they've been very supportive so far, but one never knows what comes around the corner.
All right. Professor Gad Saad, thanks very much for your time. It was good to talk to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.